Morning, everyone, and welcome to day 4 of the Grant Support Technical Assistant Workshop. If you've been with us since Monday, we appreciate your time and dedication to not only learn more about grants, but also about the NIFA programs. If this is your first day, welcome. Please note that the previous session has been recorded and will be available in the upcoming weeks. My name is Pascal Jean, and I am a National Program Leader in the Division of Nutrition at the Institute of Food Safety and Nutrition here at NIFA. Along with me today is Sierra Casetas, who will be our Zoom host. At this time, I'll invite her to introduce herself.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sierra Casetas. I am a program specialist in the Animal Systems Division, and I'm happy to help today. Welcome.
Thanks, Sierra. Before we get started, we would like to cover a few housekeeping notes. If you're having any issue with the audio or visual today, please send a message to the panelists using the chat functions. All participants have been muted. If you have any questions throughout the session for the presenters, please type them in the Q&A function. The chat will be used for technical difficulties question, and we'll be answering questions related to the presentation content via the Q&A function. The webinar will be recorded. A link to the recording and slides will be available on the NIFA website. Please note that the information presented during the webinar is the most current information at this time. Please verify the RFA language before submitting an application. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Kevin Kephart to open the session.
Thank you very much, Pascal. I want to welcome everybody for joining us today. I'm Kevin Kephart. I'm the Deputy Director for the Institute of Bioenergy, Climate, and Environment here at USDA NIFA. And it's a pleasure to be with you here today for this 4th day of this full week of workshops on various aspects of funding from NIFA. Today, we'll continue with an emphasis on our competitive programs with an emphasis on our flagship competitive program that we call the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative. That's AFRI. Now, I know yesterday you talked a little bit about SBIR, which is separate from AFRI, and we'll probably get into some opportunities beyond AFRI even here today. Now, we'll continue on with the 6 priority areas of AFRI. You'll hear about what we call BINRI, that's bioenergy, natural resources, and environment, where we have funding opportunities to support research and integrated programs on such things as bio-based products, agroecology, soil health, water quality. And we have a new program within BINRI that we're excited about, and that's on environmental justice. And some of you might be aware that there was a new executive order on environmental justice just last week. Other areas that you'll hear about also include agricultural economics and rural communities from our staff that are in the Ag Systems Division. Also in the Ag Systems Division will be our Ag Systems and Technology. So within that particular, those 2 areas, although they're separate in AFRI, as the name implies, focus on economics, also social sciences, small rural communities, those types of areas. And then in Ag Systems, we have data science, agricultural engineering, those types of areas, types of opportunities that you'll hear about in there. Very, very robust, extensive programs there. You'll hear about what kind of opportunities we have for minority serving institutions, and also how we can facilitate interactions and collaborations between larger institutions and minority serving institutions. So I'm very excited about that aspect of today's program. And then finally, food safety, nutrition, and health, an ever-growing area of importance for us here at NIFA. So with that, I want to thank you very much. I see, gosh, we're up to about 360 participants. What a great turnout. I want to thank all of you for taking time to join us here today. And as you go on and as you prepare your applications, please make sure to keep in touch with us here at NIFA. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kephart, for inspiring words. Today is day 2 of the competitive program funding opportunities. So during today's session, we'll hear from Dr. Toby Ahrens and Dr. Narun Nahar, who will focus on the bioenergy, natural resources, and environmental competitive funding opportunity. Dr. Charlotte Tuttle and Dr. Melvin Carter, who will focus on the agriculture, economics, and rural communities competitive funding opportunity. Dr. Steve Thompson and Dr. Melvin Carter, who will focus on the agriculture systems and technology competitive funding opportunity. Dr. Manoharan Matuswamy and Dr. Carlos Ortiz will focus on the minority serving institution. And finally, we will hear from Dr. Steve Zhang and Dr. Helen Chipman, who will focus on the food safety, nutrition, and health competitive funding opportunities. And then we'll open for general Q&A. Keep in mind that at the end of each session, if time allows, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A. With that said, hope you have your beverages of choice on hand, your notepad and pen ready, and an open mind. Let's get started with our first presentation from Dr. Toby Ahrens and Dr. Narun Nahar.
All right, thanks everyone. Hi and welcome all. Good morning. Thank you for coming to this morning's session, day 4, the second day of the competitive programs overview. My name is Toby Ahrens. I'm a national program leader in the bioenergy division in USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And I'm going to be talking today about opportunities specifically for competitive programs related to bioenergy, natural resources, and environment. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So this is my contact information here, and I'm joined by Dr. Narun Nahar. So Dr. Nahar is a program specialist in our division, former assistant professor in bioenergy, bioproducts at North Dakota State University, and we work very closely together on several of these programs. So please reach out at any point, either during the presentation today using the Q&A box, again, not the chat box, try to use the Q&A function. We'll try to address them as they come up, either by chat or during the presentation. I'm going to go through several slides, about 10 minutes or so, and then after that, we'll open things up for Q&A, starting again with those in the Q&A box. And there will be an opportunity later on, again, after all these presentations for more Q&A. If we can go to the next slide, please. USDA is an equal opportunity provider, employer, and lender. This slide contains contact information for individuals with disabilities to request reasonable accommodations. Language access services will be provided to limited English proficient individuals upon request. And anyone wishing to file a complaint can utilize the phone number, fax number, postal mailing address listed on this slide. Next slide, please. So the programs I'm going to discuss today span research, education, and extension for agri-ecosystems research, education extension, and related natural resources that help sustain the production of goods and services from agriculture and forestry. So this includes everything from soil health to water quality, ecosystem services, as well as non-food, non-feed products such as bioenergy, biopolymers, bio-based products as well. We can go to the next slide. So the purpose of the overview, again, is to give an overview of competitive programs that support BENRI. And I'll touch on both the AFRI programs, Ag and Food Research Initiative programs, and as well as non-AFRI programs. So within AFRI, again, this is covered another day, I believe yesterday, there are 3 programs within AFRI: the AFRI Foundational and Applied Sciences program, which includes sort of smaller targeted support for, again, it's a single request for applications, or RFA, but it's very broad. So I'm going to talk today about some of the program area priorities that are specific to BENRI topic areas. Sustainable Ag Systems is for large integrated programs. I'll touch on those as well, transdisciplinary programs. Transdisciplinary projects. And then there's a third, education and workforce development, that I will not be talking about today, but will be covered separately in a different portion of the webinar. And then I'll touch on non-AFRI programs. Next slide, please. So starting with, at the top, there's an acronym. We apologize. So the Ag and Food Research Initiative Foundational and Applied Sciences requests for applications. Again, it's very broad. It has a number of different program area priorities, and those listed here within that single RFA include things, program area priorities A1401 on soil health, A1411, water quality and water quantity, A1414, sustainable bioeconomy through bio-based products, A1451, sustainable agroecosystems, includes health functions, processes, and management. And then a new program this year, A1461 on environmental justice. So all of these programs, we can try to answer some general questions, but they all have different national program leaders, program specialists that support each of these. And so if we can't answer them directly, we'd be happy to point you in the right direction so we can get your answers directly from folks that oversee these programs. If we can go to the next slide. So in addition to those specific programs that are BENRI-related topic areas, there are also cross-cutting program area priorities that cut across many different divisions and topic areas. So if you have a BENRI-related topic, it may fit into these. So these include things like A1531, bioprocessing and bioengineering, A1402, agricultural microbiomes and plant systems and natural resources, A1701, critical ag research and extension. So you may have heard of this referred to as CARE. A1261, interdisciplinary engagement in animal systems or ideas, and the Climate Hub partnerships that are A1721. Thanks. So the AFRI Sustainable Ag Systems Program is again a different one of the three AFRI programs, and it's designed to fund large, impactful, integrated, transdisciplinary projects that span research, education, extension. These are now up to $10 million each. And priorities this year include climate smart ag and forestry, strengthening the bioeconomy, and nutritional security. And again, these AFRI programs did go, there was more detail provided in a separate webinar, but if there are BENRI-related questions to these, we'd be happy to answer them. Other programs outside of AFRI include the Bioproduct Pilot Program, Renewable Resources and Extension Act, National Focus Fund projects, the Sun Grant Program, also called the Sun Grant Initiative, and the National Atmospheric Deposition Program, NEDP. Next slide, please. I also wanted to make sure that, and again, this is specific primarily to AFRI, but there is a pool of funds that are set aside to broaden participation from underfunded organizations and regions. So this includes small and mid-sized institutions, minority serving institutions, and institutions from EPSCoR states. This is a really great opportunity for limited success institutions. So this includes support for things like seed grants, sabbaticals, strengthening standard grants, among other opportunities. So if you think you fit into one of these institution types, I would strongly encourage you, when you talk to the national program leader about a potential idea and submitting to a program, make sure that you find out information about these, because there are some different grant types that might be available to you. And there may be additional opportunities you want to make sure that you ask for and qualify for when you submit your application. For example, in partnerships. So there are some research-only programs that might fund an individual project up to $650,000. You can ask for an additional $150,000 if you partner with one of these underserved institutions. I believe these were covered in a separate presentation. If you have any questions about this pool of funds for BENRI-related programs, please feel free to ask and reach out to us. Next slide, please. The SBIR STTR program, I believe, was also covered yesterday, but certainly provides some great support for BENRI-related topics. So this includes topic area 8.1, forests and related resources, 8.4, conservation of natural resources, 8.8, biofuels, bio-based products, and 8.13, plant production and protection engineering. Similar to the foundational, the AFRI calls, this is a single RFA, request for applications, that comes out that covers many different topic areas. So the subset that's mentioned here are all part of a single request for proposals. Next slide, please. So the next few slides that I'm going to go through are just a very brief overview of how to get access to some of the programs that we've been talking about. Please visit the funding opportunities page to find the RFAs that were mentioned today. You'll want when you refer, actually, why don't we, so you use this to locate the program contact information and technical or assistance resources. Why don't we go to the next slide? So if you go to the funding opportunities page, you'll be able to click on the title that will take you to where you can find the actual RFA. So this just shows a quick little image of what it's like. This is a slide I wanted to quickly mention. So you're going to see a button here for how to download the RFA for a specific program. If you want to bookmark a single page, this would be the page to do it for a program of interest. So after you click on downloading the RFA, it's going to take you to the actual PDF, and some folks, will download that and refer to that as the their primary resource. On occasion, there are some updates to the RFA that are issued, and you want to make sure that you're aware of those updates. Typically they're minor, but if you bookmark this page, then every time you go and refer to the RFA, you're referring to the most current one. Why don't we go to the next slide? Okay, again, this is the program page for more information. Program staff contact can be seen here. I do want to quickly mention, so Dr. Nahara and I are talking through some BENRI related programs today. Please feel free to reach out to the national program leader, program specialist, whoever the staff contacts are that are listed at any time. So there are some other agencies where once an RFA or an RFP are published, you're not supposed to contact the leader of those programs. That's not the case at all at USDA NIFA. So we're happy to answer questions all the way up until the deadline. We hope you get proposals in a couple of days or a day in advance in case there are issues with grants.gov, but we're here to answer questions. Feel free to reach out at any time before or after the RFAs are published. And this slide shows you how to find some of the program staff contact information. Next slide. So at this point, we're happy to open things up for Q&A. I've been talking a lot and haven't been monitoring the Q&A box. So maybe take a deep breath and take a look and see what's there. But Nura and Dr. Nahara, you're welcome to jump in if you've seen any that you want to answer directly, and I'll take a look and see what's come in. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Toby, and thank you, Nahar, Dr. Nahar. There is a question. It says, is bioremediation research funded in urban environments?
So that is a good question. So I believe for soils related research, so if this is, a soil bioremediation kind of a question, I believe it would be covered. I'm not sure exactly where to direct you. So I will follow up separately. If we have Dr. Gray's contact information, then I'd be happy to follow up separately. My guess is in the foundational and applied sciences under AFRI and the soils section would be the place for it, but I'll follow up separately directly with you.
Thank you. There's another question. Is that, can you please tell me more about the SUN grant program?
Sure. So the SUN grant program is once every 5 years, there's a competitive RFA that comes out that institutions can apply for, that then oversees and administers the SUN grant program for the next 5 years. And the SUN grant program has 5 different regions where the funding to the SUN grant program then gets divvied among these. It's actually 4 regions and a sub-region. And each of those regions then has sort of smaller regional calls for applications and their own set of regionally appropriate bioenergy and bioproducts related research that is funded. So I'd be happy to follow up with more detail on this program if you'd like. Right now, I believe it's in the middle of a 5-year period and will be up for a competitive renewal in, I believe, a year or 2, but I can follow up separately with you and email you directly. Do we have the contact information for that one? For that question that came in? And if not, feel free to email me. I don't know if my email is on there right now, but it's toby.ahrens@usda.gov. So toby.ahrens usda.gov.
Thanks, Toby. No, it was an anonymous attendee.
Okay.
There's another question. Can you briefly describe the recently issued executive order on environmental justice?
So I'm not sure that I can do that justice. So if we can include, if there's someone that can include a link to that in the chat box, or sorry, in the Q&A, go ahead.
I can jump in, Toby. This is Kevin Kephart.
Great,
So
thanks, Kevin.
the more recent executive order is 14096. If you Google up executive order 14096, and that just came out last week or maybe the latter part of the week before. It's very recent. What it does is it establishes an emphasis government-wide. So for all agencies to be determining how they can advance environmental justice for underserved communities. And that would include NIFA. We're a bit ahead of the game in that because we've included a competitive program through AFRI for research on such things as environmental justice. Some of the things that I would anticipate we're looking for, and not being too prescriptive on this, but how is it that research, education, extension programs that NIFA provides, how do those advance environmental justice? What are the benefits, the tangible benefits that we can look at, monitor, perhaps measure? What kind of metrics? And so it's really more of a social science approach to what that type of work would be. But some good explanation on that would be in the more recent executive order. Thanks, Toby.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. For interest of time, we will move forward to the next presenters, but I want to make sure that to note that thank you for all your questions. If your questions were not answered, please note we will make note of them and post them in a frequently asked question. For the next presentation, Dr. Charlotte Tuttle and Dr. Melvin Carter will provide an overview of the agriculture, economic, and rural communities' competitive funding opportunities.
All right, good morning, and welcome to the Agriculture, Economics, and Rural Communities, better known as AERC Program Area Overview. I'm Melvin Carter. I'm the Director of the Division of Agricultural Systems. So by now, I'm sure you heard it over and over. To ensure that you become familiar and engage the national program leaders that manage the programs in your areas of expertise. This program supports economic and social science research when it comes to such things as economic and rural development, social implications of technology, markets, and trade to ensure that we are addressing poverty and improving quality of life. So improving technology, performance, and policy are good, but what are those measurable impacts now and years out? We just experienced COVID for the past 3+ years and witnessed its impact on market behavior, food security, supply chain, both domestically and internationally. And I'm sure this impact will be felt for years to come. Economic efficiency and sustainability are very important, and we have to make sure our rural communities remain very resilient. So if this relates to your area of expertise, then AERC is probably the program for you. This program builds on fundamental and applied knowledge foundation in food and agriculture science that are critical for solving real world problems. This program is funded at approximately $34 million a year. Dr. Charlotte Tuttle will give you a tour of what this program offers. All yours, Dr. Tuttle.
Thank you. My name is Charlotte Tuttle, and I'm the National Program Leader for the AERC programs, the Agricultural Economics programs. So in this presentation, I'm just going to discuss each program related to AERC and some non-AFRI programs that are also related to rural community development. Next slide, please. So the non-discrimination statement, Toby did a great job going through this, but if you look at the link at the top of this slide, you can find out more information, but know that the USDA has regulations and policies that are prohibited from discriminating based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, and remedies and complaint filing deadlines vary by program or incident. If you have a complaint, please reach out. Go to this website if you need more information. Next slide. So as Dr. Carter said, the Agricultural Economics in Rural Communities program supports economic and social science research related to the economics of ag production, of marketing, international trade, consumption and consumer choice, including nutrition and food retail, decision-making, immigration and farm labor, as well as ag policy. It also looks at research related to natural resource and use and conservation policy, including climate change mitigation policies and programs. AERC promotes rural economic development and prosperity through research, climate safe agriculture, including ecosystem services, and improving of farm management knowledge and skills. Next slide. We also are interested in supporting research in big data in agriculture and social, ethical, cultural, legal, and other potential implications of new technologies related to agriculture, as well as education for risk management, farm financial data analysis, and risk management strategies for beginning farmers and ranchers. Next slide. So I'm going to discuss two types of programs. First, the programs within AFRI that include the core AERC programs as well as cross-cutting programs, and then a couple of non-AFRI programs that relate to rural community development. Next slide. So the core AERC programs are A1601, small and medium-sized farms. So the purpose of this program is to examine the development and adoption of new models to assist landowners or farmers making decisions with respect to appropriate scale management strategies and technologies. 1641, economics, markets, and trade. I call this kind of the general ag econ program. So research questions related to agricultural economics usually can fall within this program. So this would include research questions related to the agricultural market, competitiveness and international trade, agricultural production and resource use, consumer behavior, farm labor and immigration, and agricultural policy. Then 1642, social implications of emerging technologies. The purpose of this program is to be more interdisciplinary. So it's not just a straight economics program like 1641. And the purpose of this is to examine what the consequences are of new technologies for the community from the perspective of welfare, equity, an ethical perspective, and environmental. Then we have 1651 is environmental and natural resource economics. The purpose of this program is to examine the interrelationship of natural resources and the environment with agricultural and rural communities. So within this, we look at economic questions related to water scarcity, conservation policies, and climate change. And then finally, we have 1661, which is rural economic development. And the purpose of this is to look at research related to advancing economic opportunities for rural entrepreneurs and communities with an aim to promote rural prosperity and well-being. Next slide. So on top of the core AERC programs, there are 4 cross-cutting programs that incorporate agricultural economics in some way. So A1541 is data science for food and agriculture systems, which looks at the interactions between data science and AI. 1701 is the critical agricultural research and extension program. A1721, extension education and USDA climate hubs partnership. And then finally, A1741, this is a new program, Center for Research Behavioral Economics and Extension on Food Loss and Waste. Next slide. So there are two non-AFRI programs that are related to rural community development. And this is the Farm Business Management and Benchmark Competitive Grants Program and Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program. Next slide. So in order for AERC to broaden participation, similar to what Toby talked about previously, we have these strengthening grants that create more funding opportunities for minority serving institutions, small and medium-sized institutions, and institutions with less success in actually accessing the funds. Now, the 5 core programs in AERC, 1601, 1641, 1642, 1651, and 1661, because they're AFRI programs, they provide $150,000 in additional funding if an institution partners with a minority serving institution or an international institution. So this can increase the amount of funding that you're able to access. Next slide. So AERC can broaden participation also through some of these programs. The Farm Business Management Benchmarking Grant Program supports the nation's largest repository of farm financial data. So if you want more information on this specific program, I would encourage you to look at the website related to this, and you can find the NPL, Keith Harris, who runs this program, and he can provide you more information. Next slide. So if you're interested in applying to one of the AERC programs, interested in submitting a proposal, visit the funding opportunities page. And as it shows on the next slide, you can, for example, if you're looking at economics, markets, and trade, click that program and it will provide you with more information. Next slide, please. And then you'll see how you can download the RFA. I would control find 1641 if you're looking for economics, markets, and trade. You can read the description as well as the requirements and the amount of funding you can apply for. We will also be holding technical assistance webinars throughout the summer to provide more specific information about each program. Next slide. Similar to the previous slide, download the RFA, and also on the topic page, you will see the contact for each program. So that could be me if it's an AERC program. And I very much encourage you to reach out to me if you have any questions. If you're wondering if your research question fits in to an AERC program, I welcome questions, and I'm very open to meeting if that is easier. Next slide. So if you have any questions on AERC, I am ready to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Do you have any questions? I see one. It said, would you please clarify whether A1641 and 1741 programs have an option for new investigators in agriculture economics? I searched the website, but could not find a specific information for new investigators.
So A1641 certainly has an option for new investigators. So we talked about new investigators, I believe, how you can qualify for it yesterday. 1641 economics, markets, and trade. If you qualify as a new investigator, you can apply as a new investigator. Yes. 1741, I believe, because it's an AFRI program, you are able to, but I may need clarity on that from someone else.
Thank you. Please, if you have any more questions, please post them in the Q&A chat function. Well, thank you all for your questions. For our next presentation, Dr. Manohar Matswamy and Dr. Colix Ortiz will provide an overview of the minority serving institutions. Oh, I'm so sorry. I jumped ahead. No, it's Dr. Steve Thompson and Dr. Melvin Carter who provide an overview of agriculture system and technology competitive funding program. My sincere apologies.
No problem. So once again, welcome. For those that may have joined since I spoke last time, my name is Melvin Carter. I'm the director of the Division of Agricultural Systems in the Institute of Food Production and Sustainability. So once again, welcome. And this time we'll be talking about agriculture systems and technology, AST, the Competitive Grants Program Overview. As you have read in the RFA, AST emphasizes the interrelationships between agricultural systems, components to develop the next generation of engineered systems, products, processes, and technologies. Here you will find an interdisciplinary approach where this program covers and blends a broad range of areas such as nanotechnology, automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, natural resources, precision agriculture, sensor technology, risk assessment, and mitigation strategies, and that's just naming a few. So hopefully that gives you a clue that your area of expertise probably has a place in this program because of the biological, physical, and social science aspects that live here. This program truly applies a systematic approach toward precision technologies that improve management capabilities across a broad, across the board with impact that touches numerous agricultural issues. If you see yourself in this domain, I'm sure you are focused on helping us move the science forward to address the global agriculture output needed to meet the food warranted for the expanding populations of the future. Thus, we have to ensure that we have substantial gains in efficiency in all components of agricultural systems. Waste here is not an option. The average budget for this program, I believe, is approximately $29 million a year. And Dr. Steve Thompson will give you an overview of the programs here. Dr. Thompson is all yours.
Thank you, Melvin. I'm Stephen Thompson. I'm a national program leader with USDA NIFA. I've been with NIFA about 7.5 years, and I manage some of the programs you're going to see. Next slide. Okay, we have the non-discrimination statement, which you've probably seen, but I'll just highlight that in addition to prohibition of discrimination, accommodations for persons with disabilities are indicated, as well as a section at the bottom, as you see, on how to file complaints. Next slide, please. So Melvin summarized many of the aspects within ag systems and technology already. So I have a couple slides here where you can see this slide happens to have engineering-based ideas and topics listed. And so you can look here and see if there's anything that strikes your fancy in a way. Next slide. That's continued here. We also have bioconversion with bioproducts, bioplastics, biocomposites, and then, as Melvin mentioned, the nanotechnology section, which also includes value-added products of nanobiomaterials and environmental health safety assessments of engineered nanoparticles. Next slide, please. So, as you've seen before, if you saw the other presentations, we have the FAS, the AFRI FAS, which I'm going to talk about mostly, and then Sustainable Ag Systems Program, which is $10 million each for these large proposals. And then I'm going to discuss the non-AFRI programs a little more detailed than you might expect because of the a significant crossing with the AFRI programs that we manage. Next, please. These are the core programs. And so I mentioned the nanotechnology. There's a nanotechnology for ag and food systems. Engineering for ag production and processing is a pretty broad engineering program. From that one, we spun off the bottom one, which is A1551, because we saw a very distinct dividing line. So we brought that out and called it Engineering for Precision Crop and Water Management. It had its first panel. So we had the biorefining and biomanufacturing has been going on for a while, and it used to be called bioprocessing, if you've ever seen that before. So we have quite a nice array of engineering and nanotechnology programs within this division. Next slide, please. Cross-cutting programs, data science for food and ag systems. Basically, it deals with intersections between data science / AI and agricultural areas in order to enable systems and communities to effectively utilize data, improve resource management, and integrate new technologies. Now, the most competitive proposals will be equally well-grounded in agricultural sciences and data science. So keep that in mind. CARE is one that I'm really enthused about. Sometimes when an applicant is interested in the engineering programs I run, on occasion, after looking at what they are doing, I might suggest that they consider this program. Now, this is where funded projects are expected to produce results that lead to practices, tools, or technologies that are rapidly adopted by end users. There's $300,000 per grant on this one. And then we have the A1721. These are the climate hubs, and we have funded out of our portion of Ag Systems one of these proposals every year for the past, I believe this is the second year, if I'm not mistaken. This past year was the second year for that program. Next. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, that's fine. And I mentioned the Sustainable Ag Systems Program. That's the $10 million per grant. And these are the 2023 priorities. You've seen this in the previous presentations. Next slide, please. Okay, the non-AFRI. So SARE, this is one it involves farmer-driven innovations. Now, there are 4 regions of the United States that operate as separate entities, and they run their own grant programs for the states. BFRDP, the one below it, is pretty much self-explanatory. These are for beginning farmers and ranchers for their development. ODF is a new one, Open Data Framework, somewhat of a spinoff of the previous data science program I showed you. Urban, Indoor, and Emerging Agriculture, that's brand new also. Some of the proposals that have come into my programs or Charlotte's programs have found a home in this particular one. And this was a resounding success the first year we ran it. Agribility, I put that in for a reason. This is actually a support program to provide access for beneficial programs to farmers with disabilities. Whereas the engineering program, A1521, you saw before, actual technologies can be developed under that one. This one's more of an extension-based support program. Okay, now the next one, I wasn't sure where to put this, but there are a couple of programs here these are NSF programs. However, they are paneled with NSF and funded by AFRI. Now, NSF RFAs, they actually call them solicitations over there. And so I'll ask, why are they listed? They're listed because they're complementary to many of the AFRI programs, including water, soils, engineering, and data science. And in each of the NSF solicitations, there's a section of requirements where NIFA is involved. So you can search on NIFA and find that. Now, the mechanics of applying, as I said, for any of these three, you would apply to NSF. Okay, this is an NSF program. The panel is run by NSF. So basically, the ag-related proposals are put in their own category, and a panel is run. And in my case, I help select panelists. After the panel is conducted, very much like we do at NIFA, then it's all NIFA. We have budgets to fund the top proposals. Cyber physical systems is one I've been involved with for a while. It involves things like sensing, adaptive learning, adaptive control, and decision support. And when an applicant is talking to me, sometimes I will suggest that that program is more, is a better match to say A1521, one of the engineering programs. Signals in the soil, there are 3 national program leaders at NIFA involved with that one. And the robotics one is in process. This is a new version of the National Robotics Initiative, which NSF has sunsetted since. Next. Okay, broadening participation. We have, as Charlotte and Toby had mentioned, strengthening grants to create more funding opportunities for minority serving institutions, an incentive of $150K in additional funding for partnerships with minority serving institutions or international institutions. EPSCoR and small and mid-size also qualify under this, I should say, mid-size institutions. And two of the programs, one standard, shall I say, primary program, and then one cross-cutting, which is data science. Program area priorities participate in the tripartite collaborative opportunity between the US, the Republic of Ireland, and Northern Ireland. And there is a specific web page in the NIFA set of websites talking about this particular program. Next. And visit the funding opportunities page to locate your program and the contacts you're interested in talking to. Next. And this is highlighted here. All the programs you might be interested in are under this funding opportunities page. Next. You can download the RFA, the request for applications, and technical assistance webinars that are conducted occasionally. You can find the information for those also. And the videos, I should say. The programs, look at box 3 there. You can click on the specific programs under this page, the program page, and then the primary program staff contact for information. Next. So that's about it. We'd be happy to entertain questions as before. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Melvin. There are a couple questions in the Q&A. Can you give more information on the urban indoor and emerging agriculture opportunity? Maybe some example of funded programs in this first year. Well,
we have, of course, controlled environment agriculture is big, and that was the primary driver behind that. I'm not sure if Jessica Shade is on. I don't think she's in our group here, but this new program involves those aspects. Let's see. Yeah, that is the main one. Yeah, control and any information on this new program is listed with its own RFA. So there's many, there's many aspects that you can dig into.
Thank you. There's another question. Is there an SBIR component to the AST non-AFRI program? We are developing a product that addresses several items listed in their area of interest.
SBIR, that's a good question. SBIR is a separate program, and NIFA is a separate entity. However, there have been some cases where a company will contact me, and in fact, I did that the other day. I suggested that they contact the SBIR program. Tammy Neville is probably the primary person to contact, and she will send some detailed information on how to, do essentially what we're doing here. Get the proper websites, exactly how to start it, and this kind of thing. So, yeah, SBIR is its own entity.
Thanks, Steve. A couple more questions. Signals in the soils are not running for 2023. Is this going to run for 2024?
I believe so. That's what I hear. And, when NSF makes those rules, we have all of it. That's, that's what I hear. Yes.
Can you give more details on the Climate Hub programs?
I'm one of 7 national program leaders on that one. The funding size, I believe, is 1.5 million. Next year, I think it's going to 1 million. And it's a mediumly broad program. At that level, there are some, there's a chance for collaborations within that program. So Climate Hub, it's a pretty broad climate-based program, and that's about all I can say about that. The RFA talks about those details, and that's where I would direct someone.
Thank you. Give opportunity for more questions. I see a couple questions being answered. Not sure if this question's for everybody, but what grants could be international in nature? For example, a type of exchange or research between the U.S. and country in South America, such as Brazil.
Yes. The international collaborations must benefit U.S. agriculture. I have to say that right away. There are a few countries that are prohibited from having collaborations. Most are not, but it's pretty wide open other than that. But I'll emphasize again, whatever comes out of it has to benefit U.S. agriculture. And mutually beneficial, I should say. Let's put it that way. Or you wouldn't have a collaboration with an international entity.
Thank you very much. And thanks for all your questions. Please remember to use the Q&A function to ask your questions. All right, during our next presentation, Dr. Manoharan Matswamy and Dr. Carlos Ortiz will provide an overview of the minority serving institutions.
All right, thank you, Jean. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I am Dr. Manoharan Muthusamy. I am here with my colleague, Dr. Carlos Ortiz. Carlos, can you introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carlos Ortiz. I'm a national program leader managing the K-14 education and workforce development programs.
Thank you, Carlos. And as Carlos said, Carlos and I both serve as national program leaders in the Division of Community and Education. Next slide, please. Well, this is a non-discrimination statement, but if you joined recently, I want to emphasize certain points here. USDA is an equal opportunity provider, employer, and lender. This slide contains contact information for individuals with disabilities to request reasonable accommodations, and language access services will be provided to limited English proficient individuals upon request. And anyone wishing to file a complaint can utilize the phone number, fax number, or mailing address listed on this slide. Next slide, please. So I will begin this presentation by providing an overview of various NIFA minority serving institutions competitive programs. Minority serving institutions were established in response to historical, racial, and ethnic inequality in access to higher education. For example, 1890 institutions. The 1890 land-grant institutions are historically Black universities that were established under the Second Morrill Act of 1890. In 1994, the Congress authorized the formation of the 1994 land-grant colleges following the passage of Equity in Educational Land-Grant Status Act. These colleges are also known as tribal colleges and universities, TCUs. And the Hispanic Serving Institutions Program is administered under Section 1455 of National Agricultural Research, Education and Teaching Policy Act of 1974 to promote and support the ability of Hispanic serving institutions to carry out education, applied research, and related community development programs. With a long history of educating and investing in underrepresented students, minority serving institutions are well positioned to foster career opportunities in agriculture, natural resources, and related sciences disciplines. Next slide, please. So, importance of minority serving institutions. Access to education in agriculture and related sciences sets a foundation for greater agricultural stability in US. However, minority serving institutions have found it an ongoing challenge to recruit students and provide them with a full range of courses in agricultural sciences. MSIs are currently working to advance cultural diversity in the food and agricultural workforce, attracting and educating students from underrepresented groups, strengthening linkages among 1890 institutions, other colleges and universities, USDA and other federal agencies, and private industry. Next slide, please. So MSI program goals. NIFA programs are helping MSIs to strengthen education, extension, and research capacity, increase student recruitment and retention, establish partnership with government and or private organizations, promote equity in access to extension programs, conduct outreach to diverse communities. Next slide, please. NIFA provides both competitive and capacity grants. However, I will focus here only on the competitive grants for minority serving institutions. Competitive grants support fundamental and applied research, extension, and higher education activities, projects that integrate research, education, and extension functions. Facilities grant for 1890s and equipment grant for insular, as well as equity grants to tribal for formal learning at 1994 land grant institutions are also awarded through competitive route. Individuals, institutions, or organizations may apply according to criteria listed in the request for applications. Next slide, please. So here is the list of competitive programs for minority serving institutions. 1890 institution teaching, research, extension, capacity building grants program. This program intended to strengthen teaching, research, and extension programs in the food and agricultural sciences by building the institutional capacities of the 1890 land grant institutions. Centers of Excellence at 1890 institutions. This program intends to provide support for Centers of Excellence at 1890 institutions. There are currently 6 centers at 1890 institutions. 1890 Facilities Grants Program. This program intended for the acquisition and improvement of agricultural and food sciences facilities and equipment, including libraries at 1890 land grant institutions. Scholarships for students at 1890 institutions. This program supports recruitment, retention, mentoring, and training of undergraduate students at the 1890 land grant institutions in the food and agricultural sciences and related fields. Hispanic Serving Institutions Education Grants Program. This program intended to promote and strengthen the ability of Hispanic serving institutions to carry out higher education programs in the food and agricultural sciences. And Alaska Native Serving and Native Hawaiian Serving Institutions Education Competitive Grants Program. This program intended to promote and strengthen the ability of Alaska Native Serving Institutions and Native Hawaiian Serving Institutions to carry out education, applied research, and related community development programs. Next slide, please. Distance education grants for institutions of higher education in insular areas. This program intended to strengthen the capacity of institutions of higher education in insular areas to carry out resident instruction, curriculum, and teaching programs in the food and agricultural sciences through distance education technology. Federally Recognized Tribes Extension Program, FERTUP. This program intended to establish an extension presence and support extension outreach on federally recognized Indian reservations and tribal jurisdictions of federally recognized tribes. New Beginning for Tribal Students Programs. This grant supports land-grant colleges and universities to assist in supporting tribal students on their path to higher education. Resident Instruction Grants Program for institutions of higher education in insular areas and agriculture and food sciences facilities equipment grant. The purpose of these programs is to promote and strengthen the ability of eligible institutions in the insular areas to carry out education within the food, agricultural, and natural resources sciences. Tribal Colleges Education Equity Grants Program. This program intended to prepare students for roles in tribal leadership, traditional knowledge, and other qualities of one's culture that are necessary to prepare students for agricultural and related careers in the private sector, for work with tribal and non-tribal government and in academia. Tribal Colleges Extension Program Capacity Applications. This program provides funding to increase extension program capacity at 1994 land grant institutions and address special needs, take advantage of important opportunities, and or demonstrate long-term sustained benefits of extension projects at 1994 land grant institutions. Tribal Colleges Extension Program Special Emphasis. So the purpose of this program is to enable 1994 institutions to deliver science-based, culturally relevant extension education programs designed to address public needs and improve quality of life. Tribal Colleges Research Grants Program. This program was designed to assist 1994 land-grant institutions in building institutional research capacity through applied projects that address student educational needs and meet community, reservation, and regional challenges. Next slide, please. Broadening participation. In fiscal year 2022, NIFA administered 18 specific MSI targeted programs with over 250 million in funding. In addition, through the American Rescue Plan, Congress provided 250 million to support workforce development next-gen program in food, agriculture, natural resources, and human sciences. And then, strengthening grants, it was discussed earlier, create more funding opportunities for minority serving institutions in AFRI programs. Next slide, please. Other programs that support MSI participation include Beginning Farmers and Ranchers Development Grants Program. This program provides grants to organizations for education, mentoring, and technical assistance initiatives for beginning farmers and ranchers. Enhancing agricultural opportunities for military veterans program. The goal of AgVets program is to increase the number of military veterans pursuing knowledge and skills development through comprehensive hands-on and immersive model farm/ranch programs offered locally or regionally that lead to successful careers in the food and agricultural sector. Higher Education Multicultural Scholars Grants Program. The purpose of this competitive undergraduate scholarships grant program is to increase the multicultural diversity of the food and agricultural scientific and professional workforce and advance the educational achievement of all Americans by providing competitive grants to colleges and universities. And Women and Minorities in STEM Education Grants Program. This program is intended to support education/teaching and extension projects that increase participation by women and underrepresented minorities from rural areas in STEM. Next slide, please. Resources, for resources with regard to minority serving institutions, please visit the NIFA funding opportunities page. Here you can find the request for applications, locate the program, locate the contact information, locate technical assistance resources. Next slide, please. Once you are in the NIFA opportunities page, you can click on the program name to learn more about the program. Next slide, please. You can also download RFA from the download RFA button below. And also you can download technical assistance webinar from the button below. Next slide, please. And you can access program page for more information about the program link, through program link, and access the program staff contact information as shown in the page here. Next slide, please. Well, if you have questions, please put your questions in the question and answer box. If you want to email any questions, comments, or feedback, you can do it at adminsopsteam.nifa@usda.gov. Please make sure you include the subject line, Grant Support Technical Assistance Workshop. I think with that, we are ready to take any questions you may have.
Sure, thank you. We have a couple questions in the Q&A. The first one, which category do 1997 founded university fall under? 1997 founded universities.
Carlos?
We do not have any programs dedicated to such. So probably in that case, many of our programs, as you may have learned in the previous workshops in the couple of days past, we have general education programs where many institutions are eligible to apply. The ones that my colleague Manoharan talked about today are specific to minority served institutions, like the ones that he described. But we do have education programs where many academic institutions are eligible to apply.
Thank you, Carlos. Is the next gen expected to be issued again?
We do not expect to recompete the next gen program.
Thank you. I'm just going to give you guys a couple more minutes to type in your questions. All right, as you guys are thinking, we can also catch them at the end. So for today's final presentation, we will hear from Dr. Steve Zhang and Dr. Helen Shipman, who will provide an overview of the food safety, nutrition, and health competitive funding opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Pascal. Thank you, everyone, to stay with us. If you are in the East, we know it's your lunch hour. So welcome to food safety, nutrition, and health. Next slide, Pascal. I am Steve Zhang, Division Director of Food Safety Division, and also Acting Division Director of Nutrition Division in the Institute of Food Safety and Nutrition. I joined NIFA in 2021, almost 2 years ago. Before that, I spent the time in the cheese industry and in the academia. I worked at Langston University. For some of you may know, which is an 1890 institution in Oklahoma for about 25 years. Started as an extension specialist, assistant professor, associate professor, professor, and department chair. I am a food scientist by training with focus on dairy food and food safety. With me here today is our national program leader, Dr. Helen Shipman. She will introduce herself shortly. Next, please. I'll just repeat, this is a USDA's non-discrimination statement. USDA is an equal opportunity provider, employer, and the lender. Next, please. Food safety, nutrition, and health programs support research, education, and extension/outreach programs. Food nutrition security is not only USDA's priority, but also Biden and the Harris administration and the national priority. I think food and nutrition security will forever be a top priority. IFSN funds novel technologies in food safety, manufacturing, and the food supply chains. Through our nutrition and health programs, we strongly support a wide array of proposals and activities dealing with family and community health, health equity, and sustainability, nutrition education, diet, and the chronic disease prevention measures. Our IFSM programs also support smart agriculture, climate changes, and their impact on food, nutrition, food safety, food and the nutrition security. So in IFSN, the funding programs in food safety, nutrition, and health priority areas are divided. Next slide, please. Yeah, the programs in FSN priorities in the food safety, nutrition, and health priority are divided into two major groups, AFRI and non-AFRI. We have 6 AFRI funding programs. In addition, we have some unique, non-AFRI programs. Some of these non-AFRI programs are competitive. Some others are non-competitive. For example, Gus Shoemaker Nutrition Incentive, GusNIF for short, actually led by our own Dr. Pascal John here, is a competitive funding program, whereas the expanded food nutrition education program, that is FNET, led by our MPL here, Dr. Helen Chipman. That program is non-competitive. I think it is extremely important and beneficial to know they may intersect with your interest and your expertise area. It can lead to other potential opportunities. We have just conducted an IFSN AFRI technical assistant webinar this Monday, May the 8th. The recording is available on USDA website. You are welcome to check it out for more details of RFAs and the contact information of respective program staff for more information. Now I'm going to turn the virtual microphone to my colleague, Dr. Helen Chipman. She will introduce our funding programs to you in a nutshell. So take it over, Helen.
Thank you. So my name is Helen Chipman, and I am a national program leader in the nutrition division of the Institute of Food Safety and Nutrition. And as you can see, there are a number of AFRI programs. Here we have listed the AFRI Food and Ag, or the foundational core programs. And I think one of the distinct things, as I was trying to consider, what is it about food safety and health that might be kind of an umbrella for us, that we connect stakeholders from different distinct parts of the food system. And that may be through the research, the education, the extension. It could be, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I think the connection of these distinct parts of the food systems and really bringing them together is important. We have the AFRI 1332, which is food safety and defense, A1343, which is food and human health. I'm going to skip over the integrated ones for just a moment. The AFRI 1364, novel foods and innovative manufacturing technologies, and the A1511, nanotechnology for agriculture and food systems. And those have when we say they are a single function program, single function are either research program or extension, but it's only one. And these are essentially research function programs, if I'm remembering correctly. The A1344, diet, nutrition, and the prevention of chronic diseases, and A1366, mitigating antimicrobial resistance across the food chain. Those are integrated, which means that they require at least two functions, whether it be research and extension or research and education, or all three, research, education, and extension. They have a higher funding amount, and they are integrated. For specifics, you would want to look at the RFAs individually. Let's go to the next slide, please. There are also the cross-cutting programs. You've seen some of these, if not all of them, earlier. And I think the important thing here is, as you're reading these are very broad, but be aware that if you have an interest in food safety and health, that you may find that you might not be thinking that food safety and health fits within Climate Hubs partnership or Climate Hubs, but it does. And there will be maybe a single line in these respective RFAs. So you'll want to look for what those connections are, and what specifically about food safety, nutrition, and health allows you, if you're interested, to be a part of submitting a proposal for one of these cross-cutting programs. Additionally, if you do not have that background or that perspective around food safety, nutrition, and health, you'll notice in the RFA, you'll notice that line. And so you may want to reach out to others among those within your networks to strengthen your proposals. So it goes both ways. Go to the next slide. Then, as Steve mentioned, there's the non-AFRI programs, and we have a number of those within food safety, nutrition, and health. And again, connecting these different sectors, whether it's students and farmers and schools, whether it's the food safety modernization and producers, and whether it's members of the community, bringing together the underserved populations. Again, you'll want to look at the respective RFAs, but the programs are the Community Food Projects Program, the Food and Ag Service Learning Program, Food Safety Outreach Competitive Grants Program, and the Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program, which has 3 components to it. And again, it's very important to read the RFAs, to read who is eligible, and then beyond the eligibility, who may partner into or how you might be involved as someone who's part of these proposals, even if you're not the project director. Let's go to the next slide. I wanted to speak just a moment about non-competitive programs. I know this is a focused about competitive programs, but it's important to also be aware of what we call capacity or formula funded programs, where funding goes to a specific entity. Why would someone who is looking for to compete for a project, why would they be interested in something that is non-competitive? And one thing you'll find in some of those RFAs that I just mentioned, you will find that programs such as the Expanded Food Nutrition Education Program, or FNEP, are included in the language of the RFA. Now, there are several reasons for this. One is if you're wanting to do a great project and it's something that we're already funding, it's important to know that. And then you can leverage, you can build upon, you can work with, you can build your own connections. So there are multiple reasons why it's important to know what's happening in terms of capacity funding, especially where there are intersections, I think was the word Steve might have used. FNEP, Food Nutrition Education Program, low-income populations are receiving nutrition education to improve their food nutrition behaviors, to improve their quality of life. And so in practical ways, and they've been doing that. FNEP's been around for, I believe, 55 years. It's the nation's oldest, longest lasting food and nutrition education program for the underserved populations. And so when we have this emphasis on nutrition security, which you've heard earlier across many of our program areas, be aware of what's happening in the capacity sector. Let's go to the next slide. What will make your proposals competitive? Well, there's several things. One is connecting with other disciplines and interests, being inclusive of historically underserved communities and populations, having collaborations with 1890 Hispanic serving institutions and the 1994 tribal colleges and universities, connecting through the various intern opportunities, such as Pathways, the Army intern, the 1890 National Scholars, and the HICU intern. So there's ways, if you're early in your career or you're working with people who are just coming out of school or finishing up school, there's opportunities for people to engage with NIFA and through an internship process. Again, broadening participation, be aware of the databases. That might be some that might help you identify others with whom you might include in your proposals. And then being aware of federal websites and other tools. And all of these they can help strengthen proposals. They can also help us strengthen the research, help us strengthen what we're trying to accomplish with the funds that NIFA receives. And that's part of our stewardship, and what we're looking for is how to really, truly make a difference, how to move the needle both in advancing research, science, improving the quality of life of the populations and helping those who are seeking funding to be successful. And next slide, please. You've seen this slide already, the funding opportunities page. You can actually, if you get to the NIFA.usda.gov website and at the grants, the banner across the top, you hit the grants link and it'll take you right to that funding opportunities page, which takes you to where you can find the RFAs, locate the program, locate your contacts, and locate your technical assistant resources. Next slide, please. This page is changing constantly because it is showing what are the current funding opportunities. And then the next slide will show you how to access the RFA and download the RFA button. One thing I did want to mention, we talked a lot about the RFA today, and I understand previously in the week. I would also encourage you to look at the program areas, because the program areas will give you that broader view of what we're really trying to accomplish with the respective sources of funding. As well, the RFAs from year to year, they may change as priorities evolve and as we get input from stakeholders. So if you have a good understanding of what these programs are about, that can help you determine, is your idea, what you're wanting to accomplish, is that going to help you, is that the area that you want to maybe look at for seeking funding? Because we know that seeking funding and applying for applications is a very involved process. One other thing I did want to mention before going on is that I talked at the outset about being connected and involving other stakeholders. That's what a lot of these food safety, nutrition, and health RFAs are about. It is very, very important that if you're going to engage with others, that they be part of that RFA development or the proposal development process, that is well reflected in the proposals that you submit. And that would be just a final suggestion that I might offer up today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang and Dr. Chipman. I just want to note that from the 2023 competitive programs are hosting RFA assistance webinar when the funding opportunity is released. So please watch them if the deadline of the year is over. It might help you understand the program, and please keep in mind that the RFA changes each year and is the legal authority. With that said, I will go to questions, a couple questions in. This is for Helen and Steve. When does the food safety and defense will open this year?
Yeah, we just had the RFA published, and if you check on the RFA, we have all the deadlines, the funding limit, the direct contact information of the MPO and the program specialist. And I can tell you our MPO, Dr. Jody Williams, is managing that program. So all the details are available. Another thing, just for your information, or whoever is interested in food safety and the nutrition programs, we just had a complete 75-minute we call it R3 technical assistant. It's just posted on the USDA grants.gov. So please check that out. And it's not just food safety and defense, but all the other food safety and nutrition funding programs there.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang. I see Mark answering a question, but if you want to come on and answer that, but he already answered. It was a difference between.
I can speak to that as well. The question is, what's the difference between a capacity funded grant and a hatch grant? And a hatch grant is a type of capacity grant. So there are multiple types. We did not lift that one up today, but there are different types of capacity funded grants. And again, there is that potential for intersect. You get ideas through the capacity funds, and then that might lead to other opportunities in the competitive realm.
There's a question about integrated grants. Is closely working with the industry partners considered an extension activity for integrated grants?
All right, I can add something, add comment there. The integrate, we have, first of all, we have different types, and then we have research, education, we have extension. But integrated means any combination of 2 or 3. NIFA, we do encourage integrated projects. And if it's a single research, single education, or single extension, most of our AFRI funding ceiling is about 650,000. But if it's integrated, then you can go up to $1 million. What's the second part? Or is there a second part of that? Did I answer the
also,
question?
That question disappeared, but again, look at the eligibility. And the eligibility requirements are something to pay close attention to in terms of determining whether you partner, how you partner, or whether you'd actually be considered a part of the applicant. And some grants allow for sub-grants, others do not, several words, and others do not. So you have to pay attention to those kind of things and then make your case, I think.
Thank you. Can you speak more on the equity building empowerment of underrepresented individuals, students aspect of food, nutrition, and safety focus, various ways to engage, empower them, and resources?
I would defer that to Helen.
It's a little bit tricky for me to try to answer that question. And the reason is because I do work specifically in the area where we work very closely with underserved populations. What I will also say, though, is that this is a priority within not only food safety, nutrition, and health, but across NIFA, across USDA. And so it's when I say it's a priority, that means watch for language, watch for developments in that area. I can't speak more specifically because it's not the area that I work specifically in. Others may have something more to offer.
Yeah, I can certainly add here. Several of our, say, unique, distinguished non-AFRI funding programs, they are targeted on underserved communities and underserved populations, especially some youth and youth from the underserved communities. So that certainly is one of our top priorities.
And actually, I just thought of something else. We mentioned earlier about the various internships. And that's a very specific way that we are reaching out to address that particular question.
I believe there was a question in the chat, say, is Haku has having agreement with USDA. Was that addressed or not? I'm pretty sure, yeah, we do have agreement, not just with Haku. Haku stands for Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. So we do have Haku interns with USDA and NIFA. And also we have a specific agreement for 1890 National Scholars Program.
Thank you. Are there any grants for small to medium farms in food safety?
Okay, the Food Safety Outreach Program, and I pulled this right from the program area, and it says, so I don't want to misinterpret, but it says funding for food safety and training for small and mid-sized producers and processors that are affected by the Food Safety Modernization Act. And that is what that funding specifically addresses.
Helen is correct. And we do have that program. It's also annual program, and it encourages education activities, outreach to help out, spread out the awareness of food safety, the preventative measures, of food safety among communities, especially a lot of non-profit organizations.
Dr. Nahar, did you want to add?
Thank you. I just want to elaborate also, food science and nutrition is one of the priority area for SBIR and STTR is 8.5. We do also cover food science and nutrition.
Thank you. Are there any opportunities for the FSNH funding through NIFA for international research? For example, a nutrition intervention delivered in a global setting.
As of now, we do not have any international component, but NIFA does encourage, and also we have a policy for additional supplemental fund if an international component is included in the proposal. I think our previous speaker did mention, in order to be recommended for funding, you have to justify the necessity to include the international partnership there, which means we do not have the expertise in the US, and by adding international component, it will strengthen our program, strengthen our research, and certainly benefit both US and the international partner. And the supplement can be up to $150,000.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Ellen. There's one more question that just popped up. Do you have university you can use for developing and implementing internship in specific areas? Example, nutrition and community. I think it meant, do you have funded universities?
Do we have a special funding for?
Universities can use for developing and implementing internship in specific area.
That I'm not sure. Anyone else who can?
Sure. Shiraz is responding, but I see Mark, Miranda, and Carlos have their hands up. Mm-hmm.
I'll let Carlos, because Carlos had his hands up. I think we were going to provide the same answers. So go ahead, Carlos.
Thank you. Yeah, so we do have a program specific for internships. That's the research and extension experience for undergraduates as part of AFRI. But we also have many other programs within our portfolio that supports internship or sorts of experiential learning for students. So I have put in the chat a link, and you can always just browse NIFA pipeline, and it will take you to a website where you can learn more about our education programs as they support all the disciplines that are part of the food and agricultural enterprise. So many of these programs support curriculum development, others support experiential learning. We have programs that support fellowships and assistantships for graduate students at different master's and PhD levels. We have programs at community colleges, at four-year institutions, at K-12 educational institutions. So we have a myriad of programs that support the development and the training of students in any of the topics that support food and agriculture.
Thank you, Carlos. Mark, did you want to add any more?
No, but I wanted to add to the previous question that Steve answered. So in addition to his comments, I just point out that while NIFA encourages international collaboration and will support some of that, the AFRI program is authorized to benefit U.S. Agriculture and food and agricultural sciences in the broadest context. But so any projects that do include international collaboration have to demonstrate the benefit to the U.S. That is first and foremost in terms of any project's relevance. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for your confirmation. And also, I want to add one other thing in relation to the internship. Yeah, NIFA always are trying to strengthen and expand opportunities for interns. Since I joined NIFA almost 2 years ago, NIFA and the U.S. Army established a brand new MOU to establish a new internship for people from Army. So that program is just a little over 1 year old. So if any opportunities, any initiative which will help our students' learning experience, that will certainly be, can be funded through different avenues.
Pascal, could we have Carlos share? I know that there's been a lot of conversation, questions around students, and I noticed it came up again, and I think maybe if he could share more broadly, that would be helpful.
Sure. So, but at this time, I'd like to invite all the panelists to answer any questions that they see. I see there's a couple more questions that are not specific to the food, nutrition, and health program. So just please raise your hands. I will call on you and you can answer any questions. There's one that just popped out now. It's about, I have a question about cross-cutting programs. It means we have to choose one program to submit. Could you introduce more? Go ahead, Mark.
So yeah, it doesn't mean you have to choose a single program. What it means is those cross-cutting programs cut across 2 or more, in some cases, all 6 of the AFRI priority areas. So some of those projects can just be focused on one priority area, but it means that cross-cutting program covers all 6 priority areas. So for example, care. We do work in care in plant health and production and plant products, animal health and production and animal products, food safety, nutrition and health, and as well as the other 3. Then and there's other programs like that as well. Data science for food and agricultural systems cuts across all 6. And then the Climate Hubs partnership also cuts across all 6. There's other programs that cut across 2 or more programs and require that the project cut across 2 or more programs. So for example, interdisciplinary engagement in animal systems is a multidisciplinary cross-cutting program that involves animal systems and then one of 3 other areas, either ag economics in rural communities, ag systems and technology, or bioenergy, natural resources, and environment. So the best thing is to look at those program area priorities, cross-cutting program area priorities in the RFA, and I put the RFA link in the foundational RFA into the Q&A reply to look at those and see what they're asking for. So they vary quite a bit.
Thank you, Mark. Toby and Hart has a question about BNRE, a BPP question. The website lists small business ineligible entities. However, the rest of the criteria in 2022 RFA indicates that SB are excluded small businesses. Please clarify if they are or not. And second, will there be a new RFA for 2023? If so, when?
Yeah, so I have good and bad news for you. Small businesses are eligible entities to lead an application, but unfortunately it was a one-time program authorized by the bipartisan infrastructure law, so it will not be offered again in the coming year.
Thank you. I know that there were, go ahead, Dr. Nahar.
There are a couple of questions that I would like to answer. I just gave a short answer, but I think that they deserve a little bit more clarification. The first one is, what is the definition of small business? So the size, actually the size determined by the number of employees. So to be small business, revenue is not an important criteria. There are no revenue limits. Only check marks for small business is that small business must not have more than 500 employees. So anywhere from 1 to 500 will be considered as a small business. So I hope that is clear. The next question, I just said yes, but need more clarification. Someone did ask, is SBIR and AST, agricultural system technology applications are same? No. The reason is not SBIR to be eligible to apply that, only for-profit small business are eligible to submit application for the SBIR programs. For AST, there is no requirement to be small business concerned to be just application. So that's the primary difference. So other one, I would say that Ag system technology focus on research, development, and extension, and could be part of integration of 3 components, whereas the SBIR only focus research and development. That's the main purpose, following by market opportunity and commercialization aspect. So there are some difference. So basically, as an applicant perspective, you are thinking that small business is eligible for SBIR, but we started STTR this year. So small business can partner with the faculty from a university or federal lab and can submit the application as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any opportunities for new farmers have in NIFA programs? I see that Suresh is responding. Not sure if you want to come off mute and respond. Or anybody else is welcome to respond.
The BFRDP program provides opportunities for small farmers, beginning farmers to be trained, but the grants are provided to community-based organizations, universities, community colleges, and others to develop and offer training for beginning farmers. And small farms can be partners in other AFRI grants for demonstration and research purposes. There are opportunities. You may need to work with others and look at the RFA for more details. Thank you.
Thank you. So this question is a little bit complicated, so we might need more information, but if a project falls under 3 to 5 million and the work, research, impact benefits fall under few different programs, will they need to apply separately to different related programs? Anybody wants to? Go ahead, Carlos.
I'll take this one. So I would really encourage you to think of it as a puzzle, right? So what parts of that puzzle can be funded through different programs and best fit the goals and objectives of that specific program? So your research line may be very broad, right? So you're gonna have to break it up and find the program that will support that specific activity that you're trying to do. So there is not one program that will support everything. So you'll have to break it up in different pieces and then put the puzzle together and make sure that way your research line or the project that you're trying to do will complete the objectives that you're trying to do. Toby.
Yeah, just two quick additions to that. So you can't submit the same proposal to multiple different programs. Both of them will get tossed out. So you can't ask for duplicative funding. There are programs like AFRI Sustainable Ag Systems for projects that we've been saying have a $10 million projects. That's a cap. So often there are minimums too. So if you have a $3 to $5 million integrated transdisciplinary project involving research, extension, education, and they're all interconnected, that could be a program that you could look at. And also a reminder, so for the puzzle example that Carlos gave, each piece that you carve off is going to be reviewed based on the priorities that are listed by each program. So you're going to want to make sure that even though your $3 to $5 million project is incredible, the piece that you carve off is going to be competing within a program with a set priorities that are outlined very specifically. So make sure you are being responsive to the priority area that you're applying to.
Thanks, Toby. As there is a question that Carlos, I see you're answering. I'm not sure if you want to answer live. Are urban community college who are designated as HSI, expanding service institution, eligible for HSI education grants?
Yeah, so in that case, if you are an HSI, you would be eligible for the Hispanic Service Institution Education Grants Program. But as a community college, there are many other programs that you're also eligible for. So within the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative, we have the Agricultural Workforce Training Program at community colleges. I believe the date for this, the RFA just opened up, and the due date should be sometime, I believe, in September or October. So I'll look for the date and I'll add it in the chat as I reply to this question. But remember, as community colleges, there are many opportunities that are available to you if you are an HSI or you're not.
Thank you. And I've seen a couple questions about RFAs and when they're released. I highly recommend, if you haven't already, to bookmark the NIFA RFA calendar and just keep track of when the RFAs are released and when they will be upcoming. There's a nice calendar that kind of gives an outline when the RFA is estimated to be released. Please note that they're all estimation, but they are regularly updated. Helen?
Maybe along that line about the RFAs, because I've experienced this. It's very important to make sure that you're looking at the most current RFA when you submit as well, because if you maybe you've submitted earlier and you want to resubmit, there could be some language that is new or different. And so always make sure, and the dates, pay attention to the dates and pay attention to the content of the most recent RFA, because that can cause problems for you if you don't.
And I just want to reiterate a statement I made earlier. Since fiscal year 2023, all the competitive programs are hosting RFA assistance webinar for each funding opportunity. If you have not done so, please consider listening to them, even if it has passed, as the information is still very important and relevant, but keep in mind that the RFA may be changing and that it is the legal authority. There's a follow-up question regarding the equipment grant question. Do you need to have an ongoing research grant funded in order for the equipment grant to be competitive? What if you need the equipment before starting a new research direction? Carlos?
Yeah, for the equipment grants program, you do not have to have a research line at that moment. The goal of the program is really to increase research capacity at the institution. And the goal really is to acquire that instrumentation that will serve as a shared use for the institution. So it is not a research grant, research project dependent, but it's more about, of course, it's going to increase your competitiveness if you already have something.
Any more questions or any questions that panelists have answered and the chat wants to elevate and speak up? We just got one question. For the equipment section of the SEED grant proposal package, Can I use the similar one from a previous proposal if the equipment is the same? Carlos?
I'm looking at the question. I'm not too familiar with the seed grants, so as my programs don't have those. The equipment, regarding the equipment grants program, the equipment grants program supports the acquisition of equipment between $25,000 and $500,000. So it does not support ancillary equipment. It does not support any equipment that you could purchase as part of other research projects. But here, the goal here is to support the acquisition of larger pieces of equipment that can be shared use and that will increase the research capacity of the institution.
Sure. I'm not sure if Mark Moreno is still on, if you could provide additional guidance regarding the section with the seed grant.
Yeah, I'm not clear about the question, but if they're talking about AFRI seed grants, that is not an AFRI equipment grant. Those are two different types of grants. So you can request equipment in an AFRI seed grant or an AFRI standard grant, or other types of grants for the most part. So I think Carlos addressed the rest of that. But the point I would make is every RFA has a specific application package, and they are not interchangeable. You can't use an application package even from AFRI Foundational for AFRI Education and Workforce Development. They're not interchangeable. You have to download the application package for that RFA. This applies to all NIFA RFAs. If you download and use the incorrect application package, you run the risk that your application, while it may make it into grants.gov, it will end up in cyberspace and not be found in time for review and funding decision. So, as Helen said, make sure you're using looking at the current RFA, and then make sure you get the application package associated with that RFA and not a different one. So those are two critical pieces to make sure your application gets submitted, not only gets submitted, but gets reviewed. Having written a number of applications, it's a tremendous amount of work to have it not even get reviewed because you make a mistake like this.
Thank you, Mark. More additional question about equipment grants. Do equipment grants support any type of non-permanent infrastructure for agriculture research? Example, high tunnel for on-campus farms or growth chambers?
So Carlos may want to answer about the equipment grants program, but I'll talk about the AFRI equipment grants. For AFRI equipment grants, you have to be from a strengthening eligible institution. I assume that was discussed earlier. So those are institutions in EPSCoR states or EPSCoR entities, or minority serving institutions, or small to mid-size institutions that are not among the most successful. Small to mid-size cutoff is 17,500 students, part-time, full-time graduate student, total enrollment. So that those three categories are strengthening eligible. Then you can submit for an equipment grant of up to $50,000 with matching funds from your institution. There is a possibility, certain conditions, that waivers can be made for equipment up to $25,000. But we allow that equipment for whatever is needed to do the research. or do the work. It doesn't have to be research. It could be extension. It could be education, depending on the program. And that equipment needs to be justified, and it needs to be justified in how it's going to either support existing AFRI projects or other NIFA projects or future NIFA projects. So you can't just get an equipment grant to do some other kind of work supported by a different funding agency. We use those AFRI equipment grants to support other work in AFRI or other work at NIFA.
Thank you, Mark. Carlos, did you want to add?
Yeah, so regarding the equipment grants program, in fiscal year 2023, it allowed for the purchase of growth chambers. So that would be a possibility. I will add the link to the FAQs that are on the website along with the RFA. The due date for this program has already passed. It was due on May 3rd, but it's always good to know for the future competitions that we may have.
Right, and that's a distinct program from the equipment grants in the AFRI Foundational and Applied Science RFA.
Thank you. And Mark, I think you mentioned this earlier, but I'm not sure if you want to reiterate. Is there a written dollar limit for equipment requests through a standard AFRI grant?
There is no dollar limit. So there's equipment grants, which are separate from asking for equipment in a standard grant or a seed grant. Okay, the equipment grants type has a limit that I said $50,000 with a match. For if you submit a standard grant or a SAS grant or another type of grant, you can ask for equipment in that. There is no dollar limit. There is no match, but the equipment needs to be specialized equipment that's going to be support that project and is needed. If you're asking for just routine equipment, refrigerators, freezers, a basic centrifuge, that's probably not going to fly with the reviewers. But if it's very specialized equipment for, new type of equipment or unique to this project, then that would be perfectly acceptable to include in an AFRI standard grant. It just needs, like any part of the grant proposal, it needs to be justified.
Thank you, Mark. Toby?
Yeah, just one quick addition. So for big ticket requests for equipment, oftentimes in panel, it will get discussed on both the justification and why they didn't partner with somebody that already has that. So if you are asking for some specialized piece of equipment, it's definitely go through the exercise of, if it comes up in panel on why we didn't partner with somebody that already has this, make sure you address that, nip it in the bud.
Thank you. We have one more question. Could an international collaborator serve as co-PI on a NIFA project?
So I'll address this from the AFRI perspective. So technically speaking, they can't really be a co-project director or co-principal investigator. Technically speaking, somebody that's a co-PD or co-PI has to be able to take over the project as project director or PI should the original project director step down or have to be replaced. And an international partner cannot do that because the grants have to remain, or NIFA grants are only made directly to U.S. entities. So that would actually apply for strengthening and other types. I think co-PD is greatly overused when most of the times it's actually collaborator. And I think collaborator is often overused when it's actually a technical consultant or technical contributor. And so that's my personal perspective on it. And I find even that the panelists don't typically get that distinction. But a co-project director has to be able to be eligible to be a project director if needed. And if they're not eligible, then they should be listed as a collaborator.
Thank you. And I feel like this also applies to non-AFRI program as well. Dr. Nahar?
You already mentioned, Pascal. I was just thinking to tell that Mark mentioned that AFRI program does not, he marked out the rules. Same rules apply for all non-AFRI program, including SBIR. We always request looking those people as a collaborator, not as a co-PD, because they are not eligible to take over. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, this is the end of day 4. Thanks for all of today's presenters for providing the detailed information about the competitive funding opportunities. Special thanks to all attendees for listening, and I hope you learn a lot. Please make sure to log in tomorrow for the final session, which will focus on awards and management.
Thank you, Pascal.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang. Bye, all.